Whatever happened to Irish sugar beet? From 1922 to 2006, Ireland grew and supplied the raw materials for its own sugar through the cultivation of the sugar beet plant. Before the cultivation of sugar beet, European countries got sugar from sugar canes, which were imported from the West Indies and Central America. For anyone that doesn't know, sugar beet is a plant whose roots contain high concentration of sucrose and is commercially used for sugar production. It is a crop that suits the Irish climate and Irish weather. It is the cheapest conserved forage to grow in Ireland. Yet, this crop hasn't been grown in Ireland since 2006. Prices paid to growers across the EU have gradually declined following EU deregulation of its sugar industry. The European Union offered incentives for countries whose industries weren't as high performing as others to exit the sugar sector. Our near neighbours are starting to suffer the same fate currently as more and more British farmers are giving up the crop, saying it's no longer profitable to grow. The history of sugar beet itself is fascinating, and it starts in continental Europe. During the Napoleonic Wars in the early 1800s, Britain's near monopoly on the Atlantic sugar trade meant that they were able to blockade the French supply. This encouraged the French to find an alternative source for sugar. It had been known that beet contained sweet properties, but the blockades intensified efforts to utilise this on an industrial scale. The growing and refining of sugar beet quickly spread throughout Europe. In Ireland, sugar beet was first grown and processed into sugar in the counties of Antrim and Mayo in the 1840s. The first sugar beet processing factory was built at Mountmellick in County Laois in 1851 by the Royal Irish Beet Root Sugar Company. By the beginning of the 20th century, refined sugar had been so common as a staple and necessary food product that it warranted the state management of Ireland's own sugar production. From the late 1920s until 1991, sugar beet growing and processing into refined sugar was a nationalised industry headed by the Irish Sugar Company. The first sugar factory was built in Carlow in 1926 with government support. In an era of mass unemployment and subsistence farming, they hoped that the indigenous sugar beet Irish industry would blossom. The state bought out the private owners of the Carlow factory, and in 1933, the first state-owned company, Cólach Siúcra Éireann, or the Irish Sugar Company, was formed. By this time, the Carlow factory was not producing enough sugar to meet the country's needs. Sean Lamass, then Minister for Industry and Commerce, convinced the government to build 3 more sugar factories at Mallow, Thurles and Tuam. So, what changed? In 1973, Ireland made the momentous decision to connect with Europe and join the European Economic Community. Europe began to produce too much of certain foods, one of which was sugar. As a result, CAP's sugar regime established the EEC sugar quota system. Each country was allocated a sugar beet quota in line with its consumption needs, and sugar output was restricted. The factories were modernised and made more efficient. At the same time, the amount of sugar they could produce under CAP was reduced. A decision was made by management to concentrate production and close the 2 smaller factories, Tuam in 1986 and Thurles in 1989. The final death to the industry came with the major reforms of the CAP EU sugar regime in 2005-2006. These aimed to make European sugar production more efficient and fairer to less economically developed countries. This loss was to be replaced by sugar imported to Europe from the least developed countries, tariff-free. The Irish beet growers collectively made the choice to take compensation rather than work at a lower level, and in 2006, Greencore, formerly Irish Sugar, made the decision to stop sugar production entirely. For the foreseeable future, there won't be a return to growing beet in Ireland, as Beet Ireland, who had proposed to build a sugar processing facility in County Kildare, decided in 2019 to drop the plans as there wasn't sufficient interest. The group remains hopeful that the industry will be re-established at some point in the future.